Hi everyone, good morning. I am Eduardo. Today we talk about green service APIs. So first of all, I want to talk about when I was 2002. I have like an environment engineering course, which is mandatory for all engineering courses in Brazil. And I remember the teacher talking about waste management and things that, okay, not saying that's not important, but I didn't see how me as working with software engineering, that have something to do with me. By the time I think like, okay, that's the way I can help to save energy, turning off the NUN lock, right? So maybe I can turn a light, right? So that was my idea on how a computer engineer could help the environment. However, I couldn't be more wrong, right? So today, we know that the IT sector has a higher footprint than the aviation sector. So while people are saying, oh, let's pick up less airplanes, maybe we should optimize our software, right? But let's say the IT sector have something more. The fact that it is growing, right? Unlike the others, it's one of the sectors that grows it more, especially now with the AI becoming more and more used, then we are having a high consumption of energy. So, what can be done in our APIs? I'm kind of not the kind that I would say like, oh, don't watch that movie on Netflix, right, to save energy. Maybe some, okay, yeah, I agree. But yeah, but that's not the case. The thing is, it's not about stop doing things. It's stop the waste, right? It's do the same things we do in a more efficient way. So how we can avoid the waste of resources, right? So, but someone can say, okay, but an API call is just a little bit. But then when you think about it's 100,000 a day invocations, then a lot of little bits, in the end, it's a lot, right? So we can, given the high number of calls we have, we can maybe saving a little bit, many times we save a lot in the end. So let's talk about some practices we can use, and then let's take a look on the Open Data Hub APIs, what practices we have there, what we are saving, what potential we have for saving more. So there is this book about patterns for API design. Last year we have Cesare Pautas, one of the authors of his book, giving a talk here in Unibizeta. So, and he is collaborating with me on this. So let's first take a look on the patterns that already exist. The first one is which list and which template in which you can pass as a parameter which fields you want to have. And this, for example, we have in the Open Data Hub APIs, like asking what are the fields we want, right? So this is something that we can remove from our response, the data we don't actually use or don't actually need. Also, the pagination is something. Sometimes we don't need all the data or all the data at once, right? Maybe we have 10,000 responses, but we only take a look at, I don't know, the first 50. So what is the point on bringing everything? So many times we don't need and we do. So the pagination is something that can help us to get the data we need or as much as we need. Other things is conditional request. Is like, for example, maybe you can ask something. If we don't have some new data, it just don't answer you or give you a blank answer. So something like, give me this data, and you give a timestamp, and in case you don't have any data after that timestamp, it just sends you a no answer, right? So something that avoids answering something that you already know. So sometimes you are asking for things you already have. Request bundle is like when you have many requests, sometimes you can group them in only one and get all the data at once. You can also save some calls for this. And then the last one, when we don't return all the information, we can also return kind of a link for another service where you can get some detail, some information that still needs to be retrieved, right? So these are some of the patterns of the book we can use for this. And we identify some more patterns. So we have this paper. It was not published yet, but it was already accepted to Europlop, a patterns conference that happened this year. And then the first one is granular services. For example, when we know exactly what we want, we can use the wish list and say, okay, I want this, this, and this. Sometimes we don't know exactly because might depend on the data we get, might depend on user actions, so then we can divide the data we retrieve in some more granular services that we can, okay, now I need this, now I did that, maybe I won't need everything, right? So then this is one thing we can do. The other thing is just have a service that returns just the latest update. So instead of asking, give me a list of this, you said, give me a list of this after that timestamp, so you only get the new update, so you can always get the data, let's say, you already have, and then you don't need to get every time everything, right? We can more in the asynchronous things, right? So we can have an update subscription instead of asking the data every time we think we need. We can just listen to updates. This way we get the data as soon as they have, and maybe reducing the number of calls. And we can also slow down notifications. So sometimes when we receive the information every time we get data, we can maybe also get a lot of calls. And maybe if we group this through every an amount of time, you group what you have and just send it once. So you can also save a lot of calls by doing this, right? Another one is more about when you have something on your backend or in your infrastructure that's a kind of an optional functionality, maybe some kind of logging or validation. Maybe the data you are sending maybe is pre-validated, or maybe you don't need some calculation to be done, right? So then you can send some metadata in your call saying, I don't need this, right? But of course, to be able to do that, the API needs to give that option to you. And the final one is green by default. So just let me tell a story. The very first form I did as a programmer was from a student event in Brazil. And when we look at the data of people that subscribe to our event in Brazil, we find out that most of them were from Germany. Why Germany? Because in Portuguese, Germany is Alemanha, which was the first one on the Dropbox. And most of them didn't change the default value, right? So we know that if we leave something as a default, maybe most of people will just accept that default, right? So in this case, maybe we can give some more green options in our API that allows the clients to be more sustainable, right? But okay, if we don't do that by default, maybe most of them will not do it. So one of the patterns is the green by default. Is like, okay, make the default option the more sustainable one, and if they need something else, they can adapt. Okay, so what are the impacts of this? So let's take a look on one of the Open Data Hub APIs. So we pick up data from one day from this specific API. We found more than 150,000 requests in one day, and we found out that 98% of this use the fields parameter to restrict what fields they actually need, right? So what we did is like, okay, how much we are saving on one call? So we find out that in this case, this field's parameter is reducing around 70 times the size, because it was like a big response, and they actually need, I think, like 4 or 5 of the field. So it was actually a lot of data. So it's reducing a lot. And if we pick up this and extrapolate for 1 year, right, I pick up, okay, this is an estimation. For example, it's the average of the European for considering the type of energy we generate. But it's an estimation. For example, if you consider we are using Wi-Fi, these numbers will go up, right? So, and okay, doing the math, we are saving more than 1,000 terabytes a year, and that in terms of transfer cost is more than 8 tons of CO2 a year. So we can see that we have one API using one of the practices, and we see how we can make a difference. Now imagine more APIs. We are not even counting, let's say, the processing that is being saved on the clients. Maybe some processing is being saved on the server, right? So to see how this can make a lot of difference. Okay, so these benefits are not for free. When we are documenting the patterns, we find out there are many, many bad consequences. For example, security hurts because it's more processing, it's more work. It's much easier to do something that just invoke a service several times instead of checking if there is data or getting the last timestamp. So you increase the complexity, you decrease the usability of the API because it becomes much more parameters. So yeah, there are some price to pay for being sustainable. An issue on these patterns is that they depend on the adoption from the clients. So if you give the option for the clients to filter the fields and the clients don't, okay, so you get everything. So this is also a drawback because we need both sides to be, let's say, have this compromise to the sustainability. Like you provide the API that gave these options and the client used these options when suitable. Let's pick up an example of, for example, the green by default. The Open Data Hub API have the page size of 10 as default for you to don't make a request and get all the data. Maybe you just want a little bit. However, we find out that 99%.98 calls use consistently page size as 20,000. Or in other words, I want everything. So in the end, I don't know exactly if the client actually needs, maybe he actually needs, but based on the number of calls, maybe he don't need every time to get all these results. So this is an example. Okay, if we provide an API and the clients don't make a good use of it, okay, we are not saving everything. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you very much for this presentation. So we see we are saving tons and tons of CO2. That is great.
Yes, yes. The point is not, okay, we are consuming a lot, but it's good that what we are consuming worth, and we are generating value, and we are generating possibilities and not just wasting on something we could be more efficient.
Yeah, it's about reducing waste,
exactly.
not functionality. Thank you very much.